What would you do if the only thing separating you from a killer was a thin layer of nylon? As the heavy rain drowns out every scream, a cold hand reaches for your tent's zipper. You're not safe. The storm is just noise tonight. You'll hear 3 true stories where the weather wasn't the threat. It was the perfect camouflage. First, from the rain-lashed, moss-draped forests of Washington, Wyatt Vance learns that the deafening rhythm of a monsoon can mask footsteps right outside his tent. Then, in the deep backcountry of Ontario, Tremblay wakes to a metallic sound, a tent zipper slowly opening from the outside. Finally, in the blind mists of an Australian rainforest, Callum Rossi spots a figure standing in the mud. It isn't moving, it's just staring through the mesh. Lock your tent, zip it up tight, none of it matters. Each camper thought the storm was the danger. They learned the truth when it was far too late. The rain hides many horrors, but nothing compares to what's already lurking in the dark. The rain came down so hard, it didn't sound like water anymore. It sounded like static, a roaring white noise that swallowed every other sound in the whole rainforest. Wyatt Vance had camped in the Olympic National Park dozens of times, but he had never experienced a downpour this violent. The ancient moss-draped evergreens swayed high above his tent, their branches groaning under the weight of the storm. Every inch of the forest floor was soaked. Streams that didn't exist an hour ago now cut through the mud. Inside his tent, Wyatt lay still in his sleeping bag, listening to the relentless rain for sleep. The rhythm was almost hypnotic. He had hiked 6 miles into the backcountry that afternoon, chasing the solitude of deep outdoor camping. The forecast called for scattered showers, but by midnight it was a full-blown monsoon. He didn't mind. There was something deeply peaceful about outdoor sleep surrounded by the sounds of a storm. The rain night's symphony was why he came here. Wyatt checked his phone one last time. No signal, just the way he wanted it. He zipped the inner mesh screen, then sealed the outer rainfly shut. The tent was a fortress of nylon and waterproof coating. Nothing was getting inside. He closed his eyes and let the rain sound carry him into a deep sleep rain state. Sometime after 2 in the morning, the first anomaly occurred. Wyatt's eyes opened, but he didn't know why. The rain was still hammering the fly. He lay motionless, his breathing shallow. Then he felt it, a subtle vibration in the ground. Something heavy was moving outside the tent. He dismissed it at first, a falling branch, a shifting rock in the saturated soil. But the vibration came again, rhythmic, deliberate, a footstep. Then another. The rain outdoor noise masked the exact location, but his body knew someone was walking around his camp. Wyatt's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to think logically. He was miles from the trailhead. Nobody hikes in this weather. Maybe it was an elk, a black bear searching for dry ground. Animals don't walk on 2 legs with that kind of weight distribution. He sat up slowly, his sleeping bag rustling. The sound felt deafening inside the tent. Outside, the footsteps stopped. A wave of relief washed over him. The animal had moved on. He laid back down and tried to focus on sleep rain night relaxation, but then he heard something that made his blood turn to ice, a scraping sound, metallic, right next to his head, on the other side of the nylon wall. Something was pressing against the tent fabric. He froze, eyes wide in the absolute darkness. The rain night had transformed into a horror soundtrack. The scraping traveled slowly down the side of his tent. It wasn't a branch, it wasn't wind. It was a human hand, palm flat, fingers extended, dragging along the wet material. Wyatt could hear each finger catching on the stitching, tracing the outline of his shelter. He didn't breathe, he didn't move. The only thing separating him from whoever was outside was a millimeter of ripstop fabric. The hand stopped near the corner of the tent, right where the zipper track began. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The rain sleep masking was perfect. He couldn't hear breathing, he couldn't hear footsteps retreating, just the storm. Wyatt's mind raced through options. He had a small pocket knife in his pack, a bare canister he could throw, but he was trapped inside a sleeping bag, inside a tent. Any movement would give away his exact position. Maybe the person didn't know he was there. Maybe this was a lost hiker confused by the night rain. The zipper moved, not fast, not aggressive, a deliberate, inch-by-inch descent of the outer rainfly zipper, the mechanical teeth separated with a crisp, surgical precision that cut through the rain sound like a scalpel. Wyatt watched in frozen horror as a sliver of the black outside world appeared. The gap widened, and the heavy rain began to drip directly onto his gear. A single, pale hand came into view, gripping the zipper pull. It was stark white, pruned from moisture. With dirt caked under the fingernails, the hand retracted into the darkness. Then a face appeared in the opening. The lightning flashed at that exact moment, illuminating the figure in a freeze frame of terror. A man soaked to the bone. Hair matted flat against a gaunt, expressionless face, eyes that didn't blink, lips slightly parted, water streaming from his chin. Wyatt wanted to scream, but his throat constricted. The deep sleep rain peacefulness was a distant memory. This was the purest form of terror. The man stared at him through the mesh inner layer. Didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, a rain-drenched phantom in the middle of the wilderness. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The storm raged on, indifferent to the nightmare unfolding. Wyatt's hand slowly inched toward the pocket knife clipped to the tent's gear loft. Every tiny movement felt like an explosion of sound. The rain-for-sleep atmosphere had turned into a predator's cloak. The intruder tilted his head. A slow, mechanical motion, then he smiled. Not a grin, a smile. It was the most horrifying expression Wyatt had ever seen. Completely empty. The man's hand reached forward and pressed against the mesh screen, testing its strength. The fabric stretched inward. Wyatt could smell him now. Rain, mud, and something else. Something metallic and organic. The mesh held, but the pressure kept increasing. Wyatt finally found his voice. It erupted from his chest in a raw, primal shout. "Get out! Get away from my tent!" The figure didn't flinch. The smile didn't waver, but the hand retreated. The man stepped backward into the torrential downpour, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. The tent flap remained wide open, the rain pouring inside and soaking Wyatt's sleeping bag. He sat there, trembling knife now clutched in his hand. He listened. The footsteps resumed, circling. Always circling. This wasn't a lost hiker. This was a predator playing with his food. The rain outdoor camping nightmare was only beginning. Wyatt forced himself to move. He grabbed his headlamp, clicked it on and shined it through the gap. The beam cut through the rain, but revealed nothing but endless. Dripping vegetation, he zipped the fly shut with shaking hands, as if that thin barrier would save him. The footsteps continued for another hour, each circuit of the campsite tightening the noose of fear around his neck. He never saw the man again that night, but he felt him out there, standing just beyond the reach of the light, watching, listening to the sleep in rain vulnerability of a solo camper. When dawn finally broke, the rain softened to a drizzle. Wyatt didn't wait. He tore down his camp in minutes, shoving wet gear into his pack with no regard for order. The ground around his tent told a story more terrifying than the night itself. Footprints, dozens of them. Bare feet pressed deep into the ankle-deep mud, circling his tent repeatedly. But there was something else. A second set of tracks leading away from the campsite into the dense forest, and beside them, every few yards, drops of something dark that was not rainwater. Blood. The man had been injured, yet he never made a sound beyond that mechanical zipper. Wyatt practically ran the 6 miles back to the trailhead. He passed no one on the trail. When he reached his car, he collapsed against the driver's door, gasping for air. The rain was just background noise now, but it would never be just rain again. The sound that once meant deep outdoor peace now meant danger. In the weeks that followed, Wyatt reported the incident to park rangers. He wasn't the only one. 2 other campers in remote sections of the park had similar encounters that same month. A figure in the rain, a pale hand, a zipper sliding open. But no physical evidence was ever collected. The rain had washed everything away. The psychological trauma lingered far longer than any physical injury could have. Back home in Seattle, the sound of rain on a roof made Wyatt's chest tighten. During heavy downpours, he would double-check every door lock, every window. Sleep rain night comfort was gone, replaced by hypervigilance. He started researching online forums, missing persons databases, criminal records. He discovered a pattern. Similar encounters stretching back decades across national parks in the Pacific Northwest. A man, soaked, silent, circling tents in the worst possible weather. Locals in small towns near the parks whispered about the rain-drenched stranger. No one knew his name, no one knew what he wanted. Some said he was a drifter, others believed he was something else entirely, something not bound by normal human limitations. Wyatt didn't believe in ghosts, he believed in evil, real, tangible human evil, and he knew with absolute certainty that the man in the rain was still out there. The park rangers never caught him. 3 different state parks, dozens of sightings, the same description every time: a gaunt face, pale hands, the slow, deliberate opening of a tent zipper from the outside, all evidence washed away by the storm, every single time. Wyatt eventually moved to a desert climate, Arizona, somewhere the rain rarely fell. He told his friends it was for health reasons. They never questioned it. But every time the rare desert storm rolled through, he would sit awake all night, listening to the rain sound on the window, waiting for the footsteps that never came. The false security of a locked tent became his lifelong warning to other campers. A zipper is not a lock. Nylon is not a wall. Heavy rain is the perfect acoustic camouflage. Never assume you're alone, especially when the night rain is hammering the earth. The rain-drenched stranger remains unidentified to this day, a ghost story whispered around dying campfires, a cautionary tale for those who seek outdoor sleep in remote wilderness. But for Wyatt Vance, it wasn't a story. It was the night he learned what hides in the rhythm of the storm. The echoes of that night still haunt him, the sound of moving metal, the sight of pale fingers on mesh, the realization that he was prey in a world where rain masks every scream. Don't let the deep sleep rain fool you. Something is listening. The summer storm rolled over Algonquin Provincial Park with a fury Maya Tremblay had never witnessed. She had pitched her tent on a granite outcrop overlooking a nameless lake, miles from the nearest access point. The isolation of deep outdoor camping was exactly what she needed. By nightfall, the rain started. It began as a gentle patter, a soothing rhythm that promised the perfect camping sleep. Maya lay in her sleeping bag, reading by headlamp, the sound of rain outdoor tapping on the fly like a lullaby. She was a seasoned backcountry camper. Nothing fazed her, but within an hour, the drizzle transformed into a torrential onslaught. The wind screamed through the pines, bending the trees to their breaking points. Thunder shook the bedrock beneath her. The rain became a wall of water, erasing the boundary between lake and land. Maya turned off her headlamp and surrendered to the wild symphony. Sleep rain night was her reset. She felt safe, secure, completely alone. Around midnight, the storm reached its peak intensity. The noise was overwhelming. Rain hammered the tent like 1,000 drummers. The fly snapped and bucked against the poles. It was inside this acoustic chaos that the first mechanical sound occurred, but Maya didn't register it. The rain sound masked everything. The sound was a zipper, not hers. The outer rainfly zipper, positioned at the foot of her tent, it moved an inch. 2 inches. The metallic whine of separating teeth was swallowed by a thunderclap. A gap opened in the nylon shield. Rain began to trickle inside. Maya remained oblivious, drifting in that floating state between wakefulness and deep sleep rain. Then a cold drop hit her forehead. She flinched, wiping it away without opening her eyes. Condensation, she thought. Humidity. A second drop splashed against her eyelid, then a third on her cheek. Her eyes snapped open. Something was wrong. The interior of the tent was dark, but not the absolute blackness she remembered. A faint, gray rectangle of lesser darkness existed at the foot of her shelter. The rainfly door was partially open. She frowned. She had zipped it completely before falling asleep. She was certain. Maya sat up, her sleeping bag rustling. The rain night suddenly felt hostile. She reached for her headlamp. clicked the button. Nothing. Dead batteries. A curse formed on her lips, but it died there, because another sound cut through the storm. Unmistakable this time, mechanical, deliberate. The zipper was moving again. This time it was slow, methodical. Each tooth separating with a crisp surgical precision. The gap was widening, not from inside. From the outside, someone was opening her tent. Paralysis gripped Maya's body. Her mind screamed at her to move, to fight, to do anything, but her limbs refused to cooperate. She was frozen, a statue in a sleeping bag. The rain-sleep sanctuary had been breached. She could see the zipper pull sliding downward, inch by agonizing inch. The opening grew from a crack to a slit. From a slit to a gaping maw, heavy rain began to pour directly onto the foot of her sleeping bag. She felt the water soaking through the fabric, cold against her feet. This wasn't condensation. This wasn't a leak. This was intrusion. A flash of lightning illuminated the campsite. It was a strobe of horror. In that split second, Maya saw a hand, pale, wet human, gripping the zipper pull from the outside. Then darkness returned. The image burned into her retinas, her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to scream, but her throat was sealed by terror. The zipper reached the bottom of its track. The fly door hung completely open. Only the inner mesh screen remained, and that was no barrier at all. Because the hand was already reaching for the inner zipper, Maya found her voice. It erupted from her chest as a primal shriek. "Stop! Get away!" The hand paused. The lightning flashed again. Now she saw the entire figure. A man crouched at the foot of her tent, soaked to the bone, rain streaming from matted hair, eyes that reflected the light like glass marbles. The man didn't speak, didn't acknowledge her scream beyond that brief hesitation. His hand resumed its work. The inner mesh zipper began to separate. The sound of moving metal was deafening inside the small shelter. Maya scrambled backward, pressing herself against the opposite wall of the tent. The nylon bowed outward. The mesh opening grew wider. The man's arm extended through it, then his shoulder, his head. He was coming inside her tent, slowly, deliberately. No rush. He knew she had nowhere to go. His pale hand reached for her, fingers clawed, dirt caked under the nails. Rain dripped from his sleeve onto her sleeping bag, onto her skin. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Maya kicked out violently, a desperate survival reflex. Her foot connected with something solid. The man's shoulder or chest. He grunted, a low animalistic sound, but didn't retreat. She kicked again, screaming now, a continuous guttural noise that rivaled the thunder. The man's hand grabbed her ankle. The grip was ice cold, impossible strength. She twisted, writhed, clawed at the tent floor. Her fingers found the pocket knife she always kept by her pillow. Without thinking, she flicked the blade open and slashed wildly at the arm holding her. The blade connected, warm blood mixed with cold rain. The grip loosened. The arm withdrew. Another lightning flash revealed the man's face inches from hers through the mesh. Gaunt, expressionless, water streaming from a slightly parted mouth. He was smiling, that empty, horrifying smile. Then he was gone, swallowed by the torrential downpour. Maya didn't wait to see if he would return. She exploded through the tent's rear exit, tearing the fabric in her desperation. The rain outdoor immediately soaked her to the skin. She didn't care. Barefoot, clad only in her sleeping clothes, she ran into the pitch-black forest. The mud sucked at her feet. Branches whipped her face. She ran blind behind her. The tent collapsed under the weight of the storm and the struggle. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The rain-sleep nightmare had followed her out of the shelter and into the wild. Every sound was a predator. Every shadow was a threat. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing in the wet underbrush. She crawled under the exposed roots of a fallen tree, pressing her body into the mud. Hiding, waiting, listening, the rain night continued its assault, indifferent to her terror. Hours passed, or minutes. Time lost all meaning. The storm gradually weakened, the thunder growing distant. Maya didn't move until the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the canopy. Only then did she emerge from her hiding spot, shaking, hypothermic but alive. She found the main trail by pure luck. A fisherman discovered her 2 miles later, stumbling toward the access point. He wrapped her in an emergency blanket, gave her water, and radioed for help. The search of her campsite revealed a scene of chaos. The tent was shredded, gear scattered, and everywhere the footprints. Park rangers documented everything. The tracks told a horrifying story. The intruder had arrived during the peak of the storm. Approaching from the lake, he had circled the tent multiple times. The same pattern, the same ritualistic pacing. Then he had knelt at the foot of the tent and methodically opened the zipper. There was blood on the mesh. Maya's knife had found its mark, but DNA analysis yielded nothing, no match in any database. The man was a ghost, a phantom in the rain. The investigation went cold. Maya returned to civilization a different person. The psychological trauma was a scar she would carry forever. The sound of rain on a roof, once a source of peace, now triggered panic attacks. She couldn't sleep without lights on, couldn't camp, couldn't even look at a tent. The deep sleep rain she once loved was now a curse. She learned later that similar incidents had occurred in other parks, a state park in Washington, a rainforest in Australia. The descriptions matched: the same gaunt face, the same pale hands, the same mechanical zipper. The rain-drenched stranger was not a local legend. He was a roaming predator, and he was still out there. The rangers in Algonquin updated their protocols. Campsites were issued new warnings: never camp alone in extreme weather. The rain hides footsteps. The storm masks screams. A locked tent offers no security. A zipper is not a lock. Nylon is a curtain, not a wall. Maya became an advocate for outdoor safety, sharing her story despite the pain it caused. She wanted people to understand the false security of their shelters. The rhythm of the storm is a perfect acoustic camouflage for those who hunt in the night rain. Don't let the comfort of rain for sleep lull you into vulnerability. The rain-drenched stranger remains unidentified across 3 different parks on 2 continents. No arrests, no solid leads, just a recurring nightmare for those who venture into the wilderness. Maya's warning is simple and devastating. When the storm hits and the rain sound becomes a roar, listen for the sound of moving metal. If you hear a zipper scraping in the dark, don't freeze, don't wait. Fight, scream, run. Because the only thing separating you from a killer is a thin layer of mesh, and the man outside your tent is already reaching for the latch. The mist arrived before the rain did, creeping through the ancient Antarctic beech trees like a living thing. Callum Rossi had set up camp on a high ridge in Lamington National Park, surrounded by the kind of dense, subtropical wilderness that felt prehistoric. He was no amateur. Years of outdoor camping had taught him to read the land, the weather, the subtle shifts in the wind. Tonight, everything felt wrong. The forecast promised heavy monsoonal downpours, and Callum had prepared accordingly. He rigged a tarp above his tent, dug drainage channels around the perimeter, and staked every corner deep into the saturated soil. Motion-sensing lanterns were placed at 2 strategic points along the approach to his camp. A small battery-powered perimeter alarm ran a thin tripwire across the most obvious path. He was ready. As darkness swallowed the rainforest, the first drops of rain began to fall. They were fat and heavy, splashing against the canopy high above. Before finding their way to the forest floor, Callum crawled into his tent, sealed the rainfly, and settled into his sleeping bag. The rain sound was instantaneous and immersive. It was the kind of sleep rain night he usually craved. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind was restless, replaying the day's hike. He had passed no one on the trail. The trailhead register had been empty for 3 days. He was utterly alone in one of the most remote sections of the park. The thought was usually comforting. Tonight it felt like a warning. Around 11 o'clock, the storm unleashed its full fury. The rain became a wall of water, so dense it erased the world beyond his tent. Thick, blinding mists rolled through the forest, illuminated briefly by flashes of distant lightning. The rain outdoor noise was so overwhelming that Callum could barely hear his own thoughts. It was inside this chaos that the first motion-sensing light activated. Callum didn't see it directly. He was facing the back wall of the tent, trying to force himself into camping sleep, but a faint amber glow penetrated the rainfly. The light was 10 yards to the left of his position. He turned over, frowning. The sensors were designed to ignore small animals. A possum wouldn't trigger them. Something larger had moved through that zone. He sat up, straining his ears. The rain sleep masking was absolute. He couldn't hear footsteps, breathing, anything. The light stayed on for 30 seconds, then clicked off. The darkness returned. Callum waited, his hand instinctively reaching for the hatchet he kept beside his sleeping pad. A full minute passed. Nothing. He started to relax. Then the second light activated. This one was closer, 5 yards from the tent. Callum's heart lurched. He twisted toward the tent door, staring at the mesh panel. Through the mist and rain, he could see the glow. It illuminated a section of the camp in stark motion-tiered white, and in that light, nothing moved. Just rain, just swirling mist, just the endless, dripping jungle. The light stayed on longer this time, a full minute, then darkness. Callum didn't move. He barely breathed. The rain night had become a pressure cooker of suspense. He knew the sensors were functioning. Something had triggered them. Something was outside, but why couldn't he see it? The answer came when the perimeter alarm sounded. It was a high-pitched electronic shriek, designed to be heard over any storm. It pierced through the rain sound like a knife, then abruptly died. The tripwire had been broken, deliberately or accidentally. The line was severed. Callum's blood ran cold. This was no animal. Animals don't cut tripwires. He scrambled to the tent door, pressing his face against the mesh. The rain outdoor stung his eyes as he peered into the chaos. The mist had thickened, swirling in strange patterns, almost hypnotic. Lightning flashed, illuminating the entire campsite in a freeze frame of white, and that's when he saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the camp, just beyond the reach of the motion-sensing lights. It was perfectly still, a dark silhouette against the silver curtain of rain, human, upright, facing his tent. The lightning died, and the figure vanished into the black. But Callum had seen enough. Someone was watching him. He didn't scream. He didn't call out. Every instinct told him to stay quiet. Maybe the person didn't know he was inside. Maybe it was a lost hiker confused by the deep outdoor conditions. Then the figure moved. It walked directly toward the first motion-sensing light. The light should have activated. It didn't. The sensor was dead or deliberately disabled. Callum watched in horror as the figure navigated the camp with eerie precision. It avoided the second light entirely, circling wide to the left. It stepped over the severed tripwire as if it knew exactly where it lay. This person had studied his camp. This person knew his defenses. The figure paused near the cooking area, 20 feet from the tent. It stood there, motionless again. Callum could see it more clearly now, a man, drenched from head to toe. The rain plastered his hair to a gaunt skull. His clothes were dark, heavy with water. Ankle-deep mud clung to his boots. He was staring directly at the tent, directly at Callum. The rain night paralysis that gripped Wyatt and Maya now claimed Callum. He couldn't move, couldn't reach for his hatchet, couldn't do anything except stare back. The figure didn't advance. It just stood there in the deluge, a predator in the mist. That was the tactic, not immediate entry. Psychological warfare. The slow erosion of sanity minutes passed. The rain intensified. The figure remained motionless. Callum's mind fragmented into 1,000 questions. Who was this? What did he want? Why didn't he just attack? What was he waiting for? The answer was simple. He was waiting for the perfect moment, or he was savoring the fear. Callum finally broke the paralysis. He grabbed his hatchet and pressed his back against the rear wall of the tent. He couldn't stay here. The tent was a trap, a nylon coffin waiting to be unzipped. But running into the storm meant exposing himself to the same tactical shroud the intruder was using. The rain hides movement. The rain hides screams. The rain is a predator's ally. He looked through the mesh again. The figure had moved closer. 10 feet now. Callum could see his face clearly in the ambient light of the storm. Gaunt, pale, water streaming from a slightly open mouth, and those eyes, reflecting the lightning like glass, empty of everything except intent. The man took another step forward. His boots squelched in the mud, a sound that somehow cut through the rain sound. Callum gripped the hatchet handle until his knuckles went white. If the man reached for the zipper, he would swing. He would fight. He would survive. The man stopped 3 feet from the tent door. He tilted his head. The same mechanical motion Wyatt had witnessed. Then he smiled. That smile, empty, hungry. A smile that didn't reach the eyes. Callum's breath fogged the mesh. He felt like a specimen under glass. The man didn't touch the tent. He didn't try the zipper. He just stared through the mesh at Callum. The message was clear. I know you're in there. I see you. You are not safe. The rain continued to hammer the earth. The mist swirled around the man's ankles. Callum's survival instinct finally overrode his terror. He had to act. He slammed his fist against the tent pole, creating a loud metallic clang. Then he shouted with every ounce of air in his lungs, "Go away, I'm armed." The figure didn't flinch. The smile didn't waver. But after a long, agonizing pause, the man took a step backward. Then another. He receded into the mist, his form dissolving into the rain until only darkness remained. Callum didn't believe he was gone. He knew the predator was still out there, circling. Always circling, he spent the rest of the night sitting upright in the center of his tent, hatchet raised, ears straining. The rain-sleep horror had become a siege. He didn't blink. He barely breathed. Every drop of water against the fly sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind sounded like a zipper. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. When the first gray light finally filtered through the canopy, the rain eased to a drizzle. Callum waited another hour before he dared to unzip the tent. The campsite was a disaster zone. His motion-sensing lanterns were both smashed, the tripwire was cleanly cut, and the ground around his tent was a mess of footprints. Dozens of them, deep impressions in the ankle-deep mud, circling his shelter. But something else caught his eye. A second set of tracks leading away from the camp into the dense jungle. And a third set, which made his stomach drop. The man had walked a figure-8 pattern around his tent for hours. The rain had partially filled the tracks with water, but the story they told was undeniable. The intruder had been there all night, moving, watching, waiting. Callum packed his gear with trembling hands. He didn't bother with the tarp or the tripwire remnants. He had to get out of this rainforest. Now, the hike back to the trailhead was a blur of paranoia. Every shadow was a threat. Every sound was a predator. He made it to his car and drove straight to the nearest ranger station. The rangers took his report seriously. Very seriously. They had received similar reports from other parks. Descriptions matched. The gaunt face, the pale hands, the circling. Interstate agencies were involved now. The rain-drenched stranger had struck across state lines, across national borders. Callum's testimony became part of a growing file, a puzzle that no one could solve. In the months that followed, Callum's life unraveled. The psychological trauma was deeper than he had imagined. The sound of rain on a roof made him sweat. He couldn't even watch rain outdoor scenes in movies. His love of outdoor sleep was destroyed. He sold his camping gear. He stopped hiking. The deep sleep rain he once found peace in was now a trigger for nightmares. He started researching, just like Wyatt and Maya had. The pattern was horrifying. The rain-drenched stranger always struck during heavy downpours. He always disabled defenses. He always circled before engaging. He was a methodical predator who used the acoustic camouflage of the storm to hunt his victims, and he remained unidentified completely. No DNA, no fingerprints, no arrests. Callum shared his story on outdoor forums, hoping to warn others. He connected with victims from different parks, different years. They all described the same thing, the same smile, the same empty stare, the same realization that a locked tent is a false promise of security. Nylon is not a wall, a zipper is not a lock. The rhythm of the storm is a hunting ground. The warning Callum now gives to every camper is simple. Don't rely on motion-sensing lights. Don't rely on perimeter alarms. The rain disables them. The predator disables them. If you're camping in heavy rain, you are vulnerable. Period. He tells people to listen for the sound of moving metal, the zipper scraping open from the outside. If you hear it, don't freeze, don't hide, make noise, fight back, run if you can, because the only thing between you and a killer is a thin layer of fabric and the hope that he's not already inside. The rain-drenched stranger is still out there, unidentified, uncaught. He haunts 3 different parks on 2 continents, a ghost in the storm. The false security of a locked tent is his greatest weapon, and the next time the heavy rain falls, he will find someone new. Don't let the rain sleep lull you into complacency. Don't trust the sound of rain on your fly, because somewhere in that deafening roar, a figure is standing in the mud. He's drenched, he's staring, and he's waiting for you to close your eyes. If you made it through the storm tonight, you already know the truth. The rain doesn't just mask footsteps, it hides nightmares, and the rain-drenched stranger is still out there, waiting for the next heavy downpour. Before you close your eyes for some deep sleep rain, hit that subscribe button, join the True Terror Files family so you never miss a single real-life horror story. We bring you the most chilling encounters from the deep outdoor. Leave a like. It helps more campers discover what hides in the rain night. Comment below. Have you ever felt watched during a camping sleep? Tell us your story. The best comments get featured in future episodes. If you need the ultimate sleep rain night experience, loop this video all night long. Let the rain sound drown out the silence, but remember the warning in every storm. A locked tent is a false promise. A zipper is never a lock. Stay vigilant, stay spooked, and never ignore the sound of moving metal. This is True Terror Files official. I'll see you when the rain falls again.